Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new news roundup video, and today we've got quite a jam-packed one, so I'm just going to get straight into this, other than saying, if you're going to like this, of course, give a like on the video. It really does help me out, and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Just wanted to get that out there, because honestly, this might be quite a long news roundup video. So starting off, actually, with the most recent news before we get into some DCU stuff, well, it appears that the Acolyte has been cancelled. I know by now a lot of you already know this, but coming from Deadline here, the word of the decision comes more than a month after the 8-episode first season. The news is not entirely surprising. The Acolyte did okay with critics, with a 78% score on Rotten Tomatoes, but divided Star Wars fans, which was reflected in its overall viewership. It just, as they go on to say here, could not sustain the momentum, dropping out of the top 10 in week 3 and staying off before returning at number 10 after the release of the finale, with only 335 million minutes, believed to be the lowest for a Star Wars series finale. Disney can't really maintain this because, the Acolyte costs a lot of money to make, and it's no surprise, given Star Wars under Disney, how it's kind of dwindled in popularity. Once upon a time, Star Wars was absolutely huge, and you may argue with me here saying, oh, it still is really big, but if you just kind of look at the optics of it, all while a lot of people still love Star Wars and, grew up with fond memories of Star Wars and were excited going into the sequels and the, potential and possibility of what could come, I would say there's really little to no wonder of fans anymore with regards to the potential of what could be and what could come now, if you really think about it. Sure, I can't speak for everyone, because you might be like, oh, we've got the Mandalorian movie, but like in the grand scheme of things, there's that, well, is it even a rumored? It might be a bit more than a rumor, but there's like that Lando movie. Other things have been cancelled, like obviously with Gina Carano, the whole Rangers of the New Republic thing. We had the Book of Boba Fett, but we all know how that turned out reception-wise. There's not going to be a season 2 of that, although we could see Boba Fett appear in maybe the Mandalorian movie again. We've got Andor, which was, received very, very well. I think, even though a lot of people consider that boring, I do think in terms of my critic brain, if you will, that is the most quality piece of Star Wars content that they've put out in terms of writing and whatnot. But that's going to end with season 2. Then you've got the Skeleton Crew series, which is going to just be a one-off limited series, and let's hope that's good. I suppose you have Ahsoka, which is, going to continue, and I think that, even though I don't think that was a very, good series, and I feel like it carries the show with its fan service, because even though, given what I just said, I still loved seeing Hayden Christensen come back. I really liked Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll and whatnot. So, you know what I mean? Either way, though, it's interesting looking at where Star Wars is at, but this isn't remotely a new conversation. So I guess I would just love to know what you think of the current state of Star Wars, what you felt about the Acolyte. Did you like it? Did you kind of find it like, I didn't hate it, but it really wasn't anything special? And also, are you excited for the future? Are you excited for Ahsoka Season 2? Are you excited for a potential Lando movie and whatnot? I guess the real question is, what can they do to bring back the goodwill from fans and get people excited about Star Wars again? Because would you view this to be at the point of where, I wouldn't argue irreparable damage has been done, but it would take a long time to walk back the franchise to a point of where it was like 10 plus years ago. But let's now head over into some DCU stuff, because we've got quite a bit to talk about here. Over on Threads, James Gunn said Creature Commandos covers coming on DC Official Comics in November, and this is just really cool because it kind of gives you just, a little bit of an extra look at the characters' designs. I mean, I know we've got a whole trailer now, which was awesome to see. Not too much to say about this other than gorgeous artwork, but moving on here, we do have James Gunn say some interesting things which kind of remind me of a conversation that I've had recently, whether it's in live streams or previous news roundup videos, because it's not like he mentions Fantastic Four here in the MCU, but it does kind of open up that commentary with regards to VFX, and I'll get more into that in just a second. But we have this user asking him, James Gunn, the last few years, overworked and underpaid VFX artists have been forced to work with very tight deadlines, which has led to, understandably, bad CGI in a lot of big budget movies. Do you plan on taking a different approach with your DC films? And he says, well, if you do some research, you'll see my films have always taken a different approach, and I've always given my VFX artist collaborators time to do their jobs properly, and the respect they deserve. And the quality of the VFX in those films is uniformly great because of it, and because my friends at Weta and Framestore and Industrial Light and Magic and more are amazingly talented. This is why we wrapped on Superman a year before release, and why they've been hard at work on many shots for months before that. This is why we start heartily editing during the shoot. It's why I prepare so vigorously, and why we only shoot finished screenplays. And Supergirl, which I'm not directing, is being handled the same way. I can't praise the VFX artists that help us create magic enough. And this is something very promising and encouraging and very important in terms of, I assume a lot of you guys are aware of this anyway, with the kind of standard industry practice these days. A lot of movies are rushed. I mean, this is where the Fantastic Four comes in, albeit it could still be pushed to maybe the fall of next year. But as it currently stands right now, it's releasing around about the same time as James Gunn's Superman, which, when you put it into perspective, it demonstrates a certain thing that's happening or has been happening for a while, which really isn't good. So, for example, James Gunn's Superman wrapped filming a little while ago now, right? And it's got more or less a year of post-production to edit, do VFX, everything like that, with more than enough time to polish it. And even with that in mind, as Gunn has said many times, they were doing VFX shots alongside filming for quite a while. Whereas Fantastic Four only started shooting for the first time fairly recently, right? It'll be doing that for, give or take, a few months, and then it's got post-production to do with its VFX, and it's supposedly releasing around the same time as Superman. That would I mean, Fantastic Four has got so much VFX in it. Just look at the characters, just look at Space, Galactus, the Silver Surfer. Like, you're telling me you're going to shoot and do all the VFX and condense all of that down and release it somehow, cram it out by the time Superman comes out? That is how you get movies that are of a subpar quality, and fans are noticing that these days. They really, really are. So it's really encouraging. I'm not trying to pit MCU against DCU or Fantastic Four against Superman. It's more of a comparison is what I'm getting at here, and also just trying to articulate it's a great thing that James Gunn is being allowed to kind of handle the DCU in such a way where he's got the kind of no pressure or like attitude towards upcoming projects where we're only going to do it when it's ready. We're only going to shoot a movie or start casting when the script is done, and more and more and more and more. And that way, like, sure, we don't know if this movie is going to be good. That's a whole other thing, right? But this is still a very important factor or factors that go into making a movie, or should be a requirement to make a good product as best as you can. We also have a couple of other little tidbits here. So we have this user saying, "Hi James, I just wanted to ask you, will the character of Metamorpho be made 100% in CGI?" And he says, no. Now, I've got a little inkling that we've heard something like this before, but it is so intriguing because now that Superman is wrapped filming, we still didn't see Anthony Carrigan's Metamorpho, and it's nuts because, what is he going to look like? And we know he's not going to be 100% CGI, and I did hear behind the scenes that it's going to be a bit of a mix and match because obviously you can't say that Metamorpho won't have any CGI because his character and the kind of elements and everything that he can produce. I mean, just look at him as a character, it's nuts. So I do think it will be practical also as well as CGI because that just can't really be avoided. But I am really fascinated how practical he will be. I suppose, you can, if you look at the character right now on screen, you could easily do the two different color blocks there on his chest. You could give a bit of prosthetics to his leg, keep the other leg fairly pale and whatnot. But when it comes to the powers, that's where probably there would be quite a bit of VFX incorporated into what is already practical. So a lot of intrigue surrounding Metamorpho, given that we already did get a little bit of insight surrounding Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and whatnot. And we've got more on Hawkgirl in just a second with what she said and, with regards to the suit, and could we be getting another suit and everything? But first of all, we have this user saying, is Lanterns in pre-production yet, or are you still casting? And Gunn says, Well, you cast in pre-production. And yes, we know that Lanterns is casting right now. Gunn has said that Damon Lindelof and Chris Mundy have got some great choices in mind for Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. So that's the question. When will we be hearing about it? We don't know right now. Some people are speculating, hey, well, James Gunn did do that little thinking face emoji with regards to DC Studios having a presence at New York Comic Con. Could we get a casting there? Maybe. Don't get your hopes up too high, but it would be pretty cool because we will probably be hearing about it sooner rather than later, just in the grand scheme of things, as it will be shooting very early next year. And speaking of Lanterns, by the way, we do have Vanessa Baden-Kelly posting a little bit about Lanterns recently, saying, grateful to be co-executive producing with Chris Mundy, who, if you know me, you know Chris, my plush plant pusher Damon Lindelof, still pinching myself, and the most incredible Tom King, who is everything you can hope for, ad writers Brie Gibson and Manny Britt, and the incomparable Noah Selman, Brittany Worthington, and Ali Lucci, and Joaquin Lopez make it all perfect. Needing a room like this, a crew like this, a summer like this. Happiest I've been in a long time. The world opened up in the past few months, and this was the icing on the cake. I wake up so excited to go to work every morning, and I'm so amped for you all to see what we are creating. I'm very proud of it. So she seems to be absolutely over the moon with what they're cooking up behind the scenes for Lanterns. And we also have her saying little things like, you know, missed my table read for the morning show today while we break my episode of Lanterns, but was able to zoom in. So, you know, it's very much so in the thick of it. We have a little bit of a picture uploaded of the Lanterns crew there. So again, we should be getting some updates, not like in the next couple of weeks necessarily, but maybe heading into late September, October, November-ish. There could be, you know, a lot more substance there with some Lanterns news. Now, let's talk about what Isabela Merced had to say here to Deadline in this interview, because it got a few people talking about, because, you know, there's been a lot of discourse around the Lordtech suits that Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl are wearing. And she said, well, you know, there have been some leaked pictures online. However, I think James knows what he wants, and this specific suit is, and this is the important thing, and this specific suit is for this specific timeline in the story. And I don't know what else I can say, but I gotta say the helmet was my absolute favorite. It's so sick, it's so badass, and it's perfect. So this really kind of articulates what I've been theorizing about, what many of you have been theorizing about, in how, where she says, this specific suit is for this specific timeline in the story. She means that they're wearing these costumes because of where they're at this current point in the DCU. Because what you have to bear in mind as well, with all the theories, while we can't say things as a factual statement, we've all theorized about how there could be a little bit of a reverse Kingdom Come influence here, with just how, given that we know the DC Universe has had heroes and villains exist for a long time, this could mean that, you know, the world as a result has kind of acclimated to heroes in such a way where you may have kind of quite a few government teams, as we know, with Creature Commandos, previously Task Force X. Now there could be some, you know, corporate, in a way, sponsored heroes through Lordtech. I mean, we literally see that their suits have the Lordtech logo on it, and we know that Mr. Terrific is like a self-made billionaire, so like, why is he doing, we don't know, like, why is he a part of another company's branding on the suit? Now, sure, I know many people say there's like maybe a JLI, like a Justice League kind of logo on the suit. Like, no matter what you want to say about that, it is quite literally a Lordtech logo. We see that on the shop windows of Metropolis. You know, there's products being sold. We sell products from Samsung, Lordtech. There's all kinds of theories. No matter what you want to put with that and put into that box, it doesn't mean that these characters won't go on to get their own superhero autonomy, perhaps inspired by Superman himself. It's not to say that these characters are corporate sellouts, because I've had some conversations with people about that, and they're worried about how, well, this doesn't really reflect the character in the comics. They wouldn't be a corporate sellout, like Hawkgirl wouldn't necessarily do that. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think, if anything, it's just where we're at in the DCU. Perhaps this is a bit more of a normalized thing. They think that this is like the best thing they can do, to be organized and do things like this. But regardless, I think the destination will be Superman's legacy, inspiring heroes like this to, you know, eventually get their own suits. Hence why, Isabela Merced says here, this specific suit entailing, well, there may be other suits, right, is for this specific timeline in the story. But as the story progresses, we'll see her get a different one. Now, I don't think, by the way, that guarantees we're going to see a whole new design and a whole new suit in this movie. I know many of you think that we will. I just don't want to get expectations up for that. It could be the kind of thing in where when we revisit these characters, they could have their own suit in the next project. But I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. You could get it towards the very end of the movie, maybe. But I have a lot of confidence in saying, just intuitively here, that the Hawkgirl suit, the Lordtech one that you're seeing in the movie, will be heavily featured throughout most of runtime, if not all of it. I would love to know if you guys agree or disagree with me there. This is all kind of what we were thinking anyway. Obviously, they weren't going to stay in Lordtech suits for the whole duration of Chapter 1 or Chapter 2. So any and all thoughts, let me know down in the comments below. But moving on to some other DCU news here. Oh man, Natalia Safran, DC Film News, has seemingly confirmed again that Kumail Nanjiani is Booster Gold. And many of you have pointed out saying, well, Natalia Safran likes all the comments on Instagram. Sure. But, at the end of the day, she's still the co-head of DC Studios' wife, Peter Safran, and she still reads the message and still likes it. Now, I do want to stress, this doesn't remotely confirm anything. The only official confirmation you can get is when James Gunn confirms it. But still, she liked a comment saying, can't wait to see Kumail Nanjiani as Booster Gold. It's just adding more fuel to the fire, obviously. And, I'm pretty much dead set on that this is going to be true. But speaking of Booster Gold, we have an update here from Nexus Point News saying Danny McBride, John Carcieri, and Jeff Fredley are no longer attached to write Booster Gold, but McBride may still be involved down the line in some capacity. If you guys remember, a month or two ago, we did have that article from them announcing the writing team behind it, and a lot of people were liking that, given their history and success in the past, and how their writing skills do seem to fit the framework of what Booster Gold is and who the character is. But apparently, they've learned behind the scenes, or while this was never confirmed in the first place, I guess they're not going to be involved. But having said that, Nexus Point News is still pretty reliable. I will say that's why I refer to them in these videos. For example, we were just talking about Vanessa Baden-Kelly's involvement in Lanterns, and they were the first to report that before it was officially announced that she was a part of the team. And Booster Gold's quite a while away, you would have to think, just given the projects that we know we're getting. We're getting Creature Commandos and Superman, and then Lanterns filming, Peacemaker Season 2 maybe releasing sometime next year. John Cena recently said that as well. They should be able to make that work, perhaps in August, September, October, November-ish release date next year. And then, you got Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow the summer after that. So Booster Gold, I don't think that's, they've got plenty of time to figure this one out. Now, up next, I just wanted to chuck this in here because I just found it fascinating in how discussing film reporting here, or re-reporting, saying J.J. Abrams and his production company, Bad Robot, are finalizing a new multi-year film and TV deal with Warner Brothers. Abrams will be taking a massive pay cut from his 2019 contract, which is fascinating because, yes, they mentioned that 2019 contract, and I remember making a video about that at the time, man. But, the thing that's kind of crazy about it is, okay, say what you will about J.J. Abrams, but he's still kind of arguably a big name in how Warner Brothers want to maybe, still work with him, so they did a deal with him that was in the $250 million range, and now they're doing another one. But why the big pay cut? Because I don't know if you remember, nothing, I'm pretty sure, do correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty much next to nothing came out of that 2019 contract, which cost Warner Brothers $250 million, because at the time, J.J. Abrams was developing this, original show of his called Demimond, but, that was going to cost too much money, so they kind of passed on that. Then, at the time, for example, the reason why Constantine couldn't be in The Sandman, and that's where we got the gender bent Johanna Constantine with Jenna Coleman playing that, because the rights were caught up with what he was trying to do over at HBO Max at the time, now Max, with a Constantine series that was in active development. That was kind of, getting somewhere. I remember covering that as well. Didn't happen. They were doing a Madame X series. Didn't happen. They were doing a Justice League Dark thing with Zatanna and stuff. Didn't happen. So basically, imagine like forking out 250 mil to have like J.J. Abrams and his production company, Bad Robot Productions, do stuff for you, and then like nothing really comes out of it. So I don't know what J.J. Abrams is going to do, but fair play to him because he's getting major bags for like not really doing very much. Or maybe he like is doing stuff behind the scenes, but it doesn't even really come to anything. And then we have a little teeny tiny tidbit from Daniel RPK here saying that the Waller series is described to be darker and more grounded than Peacemaker. So there's not really too much to say here other than I do kind of like that. Like Amanda Waller can and is a very serious character at the end of the day. Peacemaker does have a lot of it is still very R-rated, but it's also very kind of satirical and jokey and whatnot. And we like that in terms of the tone that Peacemaker has. But Waller, I would like, considering she's getting her own show, a deep dive into, just how diabolical and sophisticated and complicated that character is, to be honest. And with, a lot of people are mentioning Deathstroke, and we know that James Gunn has hinted multiple times now that Deathstroke is in the works in one way or another in the DCU. It would be pretty cool, and I've talked about this before, and how it would be, Waller making teams, or at least contracting people to do stuff for her. Maybe you could argue Deathstroke could be brought in this way to have a larger role into something else, like maybe even the Titans. But either way, it's nice to know that the Waller series, even though this is a rumor from Daniel RPK, who's a scooper, could be quite a bit more of a serious-toned, darker and more grounded series than what you would expect from like Peacemaker, because originally Waller was described as like a Peacemaker season 1.5, and that would have kind of implied that it would be a bit of a lighter series kind of thing, but maybe it's going to be developed into something different now that they would have had to have actually rethought some things, given that Waller was meant to be arriving first. So they would have to have restructured that because Peacemaker season 2 is now arriving first. So maybe they've also thought, okay, let's make it a bit more of its own thing rather than the Peacemaker season 1.5. And let me know any wants and desires that you have for the Waller series. And would you like Deathstroke to be introduced in that, to have a larger role in something else? But now, lastly, guys, we need to get into Joker, because Todd Phillips had an interview with Variety, and where we actually got quite a bit of information about like the movie, their approach to it, what it was originally going to be, talks about Harley Quinn, the differences, all kinds of things like that. So let's get into this. I've actually just cut out a few things that I felt were the main things of the article. So one thing that I found really fascinating is that Joker 2 was meant to be something different entirely. So there's this one bit in where they talk about Joaquin Phoenix, and they say, when he fell asleep one night, Phoenix had a vision of Arthur Fleck, the man behind Joker's clown makeup, performing on stage, telling jokes and singing. Todd was in the wings talking to me through a headset, Phoenix remembers. I woke up feeling elated and called him, hoping he'd want to do a show with me. So taking their act to Broadway. But then they realized that it takes 4 years to put something like that together, and is Joaquin really going to give 6 months of his life to do that every night on stage? And then you had COVID hit as well, and they were thinking of maybe still doing something like that, but a bit smaller, but then eventually it turned into Joker 2. So kind of crazy to imagine that a sequel to Joker could have been something like Broadway, with Phoenix on Broadway, but they're kind of like, maybe we're not really going to go there. But we also learned that Joker Folie à Deux is set 2 years after the first film. Now Arthur is locked up in a psych ward and facing the death penalty. But after meeting a fellow patient, Harleen Lee Quinzel, who is obsessed with him, or rather his alter ego Joker, Arthur ditches his medication and prances into a fantasy world that often plays like the MGM musicals of yesteryear on acid. And I think that makes sense, 2 years after the events of the first movie. Perhaps, I've got a theory in how he wasn't really contesting a trial, and that's why there's that interview he has with that news reporter in where he says, what's changed, Arthur? Maybe he's actually going to try and fight to not actually get the death penalty penalty now. Continue to say here, it's a movie that kicks off with a Looney Tunes-inspired cartoon starring the Joker before hurtling through prison riots, courtroom face-offs, and a variety show sequence that finds Phoenix and Gaga portraying homicidal Sonny and Cher. As their bond intensifies, Arthur and Lee break into songs like Get Happy, For Once in My Life, and That's Life that convey their shifting emotions. He's drawn to romantic ballads, and she prefers music about power. So this is where we get into a bit of talk about the musical thing, and Todd Phillips actually articulates exactly what I've been saying for like the past 2 or 3 years, or however long it's been that I've been covering this, and how he says most of the music in the movie is really just dialogue, Phillips says. I don't know if this is going to be reassuring for some people. It's just Arthur not having the words to say what he wants to say, so he sings them instead. But he goes on to say here, I just don't want people to think that it's like In the Heights, which reminds me of a quote, I covered a couple of years ago, where apparently it's more A Star Is Born than In the Heights, if you guys remember that, where the lady in the bodega starts to sing, and they take it out onto the street, and the police are dancing, pointing out that most of the musical numbers exist in Arthur and Lee's warped imaginations. No disrespect, because, I loved In the Heights, but yeah, again, he doesn't want people to think of it like that kind of way, and Phoenix agrees. It was important to me that we never perform the songs as one typically does in a musical. We didn't want vibrato and perfect notes. Instead, the goal was to do something nerve-wracking but honest. The result is captivating in the way that Phoenix's uninhabited trance dancing in the first Joker was so wildly arresting. So yeah, if you think of that bathroom dance scene and how that kind of took a whole separate tone and moment and scene in the film to what you were seeing elsewhere in other scenes in the film, this is going to be a similar thing where I think it's quite artfully done and really only helps aid the tell the story of the shared madness between both characters. And Joker and Harley are very theatrical characters, which is why I'm really actually okay with what we're seeing and hearing about this movie in this department. And actually, the idea of having Harley Quinn in the next movie, Joker 2, was actually an inspiration from Joaquin Phoenix, and how Joaquin Phoenix also spoke in early talks about how he raised the prospect of pairing Arthur with a female Joker who could serve as a dance partner in a kind of psychotic tango, which, of course, led to Harley, as she's the perfect character in the source material to, bring that to life. So, but as played by Gaga, this Harley may be manipulative and immoral, but she's also more grounded. So this is where Phillips said something that I think, some people were kicking up a fuss about over on Twitter, saying the high voice, that accent, the gum chewing, and all of that sort of sassy stuff that's in the comics, we stripped that away, Phillips says. We wanted her to fit into this world of Gotham that we created from the first movie. And then you have some people saying, well, that's not Harley Quinn. On the contrary, I actually beg to differ. I think it's okay to still do a character that is and has the characteristic traits of Harley Quinn, but yet is also a variation on that character, an Elseworlds variation, an Elseworlds story. It doesn't mean it's not Harley Quinn, so to speak. I know some people will argue about this one, but I'm very open to stuff like this, and I'm not the kind of person to be like, oh, well, that's not the character at all. Do people know what Elseworlds stories are? Or have people not read enough things in where you actually do have varied takes on many characters in the comic books, but while still not deviating to the point of where they're literally unrecognizable, I don't know, Batman wearing a yellow suit and flying on an umbrella like Mary Poppins. That is when you would be like, okay, that is not really a variation, that is kind of not really incorporating the character to who he is at all, right? Whereas doing Harley in this way in the movie, I mean, look at Batman Caped Crusader. Now, you may not like Harley Quinn in that, but Bruce Timm, the co-creator, I think has the liberty and the authority to maybe still do stuff that's faithful to Harley Quinn in Caped Crusader, but do a bit of a variation with changing some things up. And he did that. And I would still say, hey, there's a take and a variation on Harley Quinn. But I would still say that what we're going to get from Lady Gaga's Harleen Quinzel in this film will basically be that. I wouldn't say at all that that's not Harley Quinn. It's just maybe you're not going to go with the more, again, the accent, the gum-chewing, sassy Harley like maybe you would have from Margot Robbie. Now, as for Joker 3, guys, despite having come back for a sequel, Phillips is ready to turn the page on his comic book experience. It was fun to play in this sort of sandbox for 2 movies, but I think we've said what we've wanted to say in this world, he says. In other words, don't hold your breath for Joker 3. And I think that's fine. I mean, Jesus, like people have been saying for the longest time, that, you know, Joker doesn't need a sequel, so I don't think they're going to do another one after Joker 2, so don't worry about that if you're really not about this whatsoever. But yeah, I just wanted to chuck these details in here because it's just some, you know, and I recommend reading the whole Variety article for yourself because I would say those are some of the main nuggets that interested me. But there is like a whole bunch of stuff and comments from Lady Gaga, Joaquin Phoenix, and Todd Phillips in other areas. Let me know any and all thoughts on that and everything else in this video because I need to kind of wrap it up here because we've been talking for a long time today. So I'm just going to love you and leave you. Leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe if you're brand new here. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.